Hi everyone, today we're talking about Zentangle and how to create a Zentangle. Now, if you are unfamiliar with Zentangle or if you've never heard of it before, basically what it is a form of abstract art that relies on using black and white, so your values, and using a variety of patterns. And it's kind of trendy right now, really big online. If you type in Zentangle, you'll come up with lots of different things. And Zentangles can be as simple as just a complete abstract design of patterns, as with each of these examples. It can get a little more complicated when you choose an object, whether that's an animal or something that you would wear, and you Zentangle it. Or it could get as complicated as choosing a three-dimensional object, such as this Starbucks cup, that you actually draw on and create Zentangles from. Some people also like to do them on rocks. Seriously, if you look this stuff up, there are so many different options, and each option inspires new options. So when you get a chance after you're done with this video, definitely go to your favorite search engine and type Zentangle and see what you come up with. So today we're going to talk about the basics of Zentangle and how to create one, just as a mini practice. Now, I am going to expect that you do this and hand it in so that I can see that you've watched this video and that you've got the concept, and then we'll talk about what options you have in terms of your final project. So the materials you are going to need, you're going to need a small square of paper, which you'll get from me. You're going to need a pencil just to get you started, but after that we're going to put it away. And you're also going to need a fine tip brand new Sharpie marker, which I have at my desk, so make sure that you come and get those. The next thing you're going to need is actual Zentangle patterns, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, where am I going to find those? So a couple resources that we have inside the room. I have some books on Zentangle basics. I will keep each of these at my desk, and you can come up after the video is over, and if you'd like to borrow one, you can. Do keep in mind that I only have 2 books, so once those are gone, you know, we're kind of out of luck for that. But I do have a variety of patterns in a handout that you can look at. And the nice thing about the handouts is that they build on themselves. And what I mean by that, as with any Zentangle pattern, so whether you're looking in the book or at the worksheet that I have, you're going to notice that the directions progress step by step. So it'll show you in the first box the lines to make, then it'll show you what to add on to it, and you just kind of keep adding until you get to the level of finishedness that you want. So in other words, I could create a Zentangle or a section of a Zentangle just by stopping at that point if I wanted to. I could stop at the middle if I wanted to, or I could get really complicated and take it all the way to the end. And feel free to, if you're looking at a pattern and you say, hey, you know what, instead of having these stripes in the middle curves, I want to make those solid, you can do that. So you can take somebody else's pattern and kind of embellish it. So you've got a lot of different options between the packet and the book. If those aren't enough options, there's our old friend, the internet. So feel free to, again, type in Zentangle patterns. There are step-by-step worksheets online. There are YouTube videos that you can watch. And I'll also try to make a Padlet that has a bunch of different resources that you can look at. Okay, so getting back to getting started. After you've taken a look at a couple different patterns and decided which ones you want to create, you're going to start with that pencil that I showed you before, just to set yourself up. So for our practice one, you're going to take your pencil and you're going to draw 4 little dots, 1 in each corner of your paper. So you're basically creating a square within a square. And the purpose of this is just to create a boundary or a frame for your Zentangle. So from there, I'm going to take my pencil lines and I'm just going to connect them. And this does not need to be perfect. Of my research in Zentangle over and over again, it keeps saying you don't need to be perfect. Mistakes are okay for this. When I've completed my dots, I'm going to have a little frame that looks something like this. And I'm not pressing super hard. I'm kind of keeping light pressure on this for right now. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create what Zentangle artists call a string. And a string is basically a random line across the little board that you just created that divides up the space. And as I said, it can be completely random, does not have to be perfect, does not have to be of anything. If you wanted to make it a concrete shape, you could, but you can see I'm just taking lines and drawing them in a very abstract manner. What this is doing, the purpose of our string, once we've established it, is to give yourself different sections to draw in. Each section is going to contain a different Zentangle pattern. So just to walk us through that one more time, you create your frame, you create your string, and then within each section of the string, that's where you're going to tangle. And to tangle is to take that Sharpie marker that I showed you before and to just start creating patterns. So for me, what I did was I looked at one of the handouts that I have available, and I just went step by step from that. If you're using a YouTube video, feel free to pop in some headphones or keep the volume low and watch that and just create as you're drawing. The key thing to the Zentangle is that we're not going back. We're done with the pencil, so we're not using pencil anymore. It's really important that you concentrate on this. So for this project, we're not going to talk. I'll say that one more time. We're not going to talk during this project because that helps us to focus. If you're there chatting with your friend and you're kind of drawing, what's going to happen is because you're not using a pencil to guide you and you are not allowed to use whiteout, you could easily turn this into a mess really quickly. So we've got to be quiet as we're doing this. Part of the Zentangle process is actually to get you in this sort of meditative zone. And studies have shown that when you're doing Zentangle, because it's repetition, because it's pattern, it actually relaxes your brain. So this is a great technique for stress relief. It's great before tests, it's great before or after tests. Or if you have, a big important sports game coming up, something like that. This is a good way to kind of calm yourself down just by getting in this repeated motion habit. So I'm looking at a particular pattern where you're just creating a series of lines going under and over. And I'm not going to show you everything that I'm going to do on this Zentangle, but just to kind of get us started, just putting ink to paper and drawing. And anytime I see a line, my pattern calls for the artist to go behind the lines and underneath. So I'm kind of creating a weave right now if we look at this. Now, because I'm not talking, I can concentrate on where I want to put my lines, and I'm being very thoughtful about this. Another thing I notice myself doing as I'm drawing is in order to get to certain places, I'm turning my little tile that I'm drawing on. It's really important that you do this. Don't try and force your hand to draw in a way that's uncomfortable. And notice too, I'll do one more. So notice that I used the string as my outline for where I was going to create my pattern. I stayed within that border. Now, on the sample that I created for this video, I noticed that in some sections, my patterns, I didn't want to stick inside of it, so I just kind of kept going. So it's okay to go outside of these boundaries. Some people like to outline the boundaries. You don't have to. You could completely fill them with patterns and let them disappear. But as I said, okay, so I'm moving on to a new section and I'm creating a new pattern. This is just a simple chevron pattern. But I really don't want to talk as I'm doing this. Because if I do, my lines might come out uneven, they might come out messy. The key to a really good Zentangle is concentration, a variety of patterns, and a good distribution of black and white. So one thing I want to think about as I create each of my sections of pattern is how am I going to balance all of these busy patterns with areas of solid black? And I'll show you that in just a minute. So it's looking pretty good. I kind of like, you know, the back and forth between this pattern and this pattern, but they're kind of conflicting because they're made of really small lines. So to help balance that out, I'm going to concentrate on this section that I just drew, the chevrons, and I'm going to alternate some solid black areas with some pure white areas. And this is going to help to ground my image and also sort of fill up the space in a very eye-pleasing way. The samples that I showed you before had a really good balance of black and white. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, how am I going to balance out my black and white? A really easy way to do that is to look at your pattern and take every other section and fill it in solid. So in my chevrons, I'm not going to fill in every single row black because then I'd have just a big black section, but I'm going to skip every other, and this is where that concentration piece comes in, because if I'm talking, I might end up going outside of the lines, or I might you know, put one solid area too close to another. So if you think in terms of every other, that's going to make your job a little bit easier. And notice again, I turned my page because it was going to be kind of hard to reach this last section of chevrons otherwise. Because this goes right up against the next section, I am going to create that outline. Okay. So notice the difference if you were to go back a couple seconds and see the section that I had before. We have a nice push and pull between this more open white area and now this more blocked in solid area. You want to create that balance of black and white to help not make it a confusing jumble. Because too many patterns without any solid white solid black to ground it is just going to look sort of liney and confusing for your viewer. So I'm going to show you a version that I got a little bit farther on. Patterns are really easy to find. I highly recommend looking online, watching a couple videos and trying them. You are free to make up your own, but I always recommend, you know, at least when you're starting out, looking at someone else's work. In this case, it's not cheating because you're using it as a starting point for your own work. You're not trying to pass off somebody else's work as your own. You're using it as an inspiration because what you're creating is never going to be exactly the same as the person that you're looking at online. And if it is, well then we're running into plagiarism, and that's a problem. All right, so you can see one section I kind of filled in with these wavy lines, kind of like our op art last year. And then I'm doing a series of white dots on a black background. You know, maybe I'll keep it kind of simple for my last pattern and just create, well, one thing you want to think about is, you know, how many straight patterns do you have? How many round patterns do you have? And try and balance them that way by alternating sections of straight and round, just to give your viewer something kind of interesting to look at. Okay, so I'm going to go with this kind of rectangle pattern that I just found, which is kind of neat. And that alternates, so I'm going to go in between. And I'm just going to keep on doing this until my little pattern is complete. And as long as you concentrate, these don't take too long. All right, so I ended up with something that kind of looks like bricks. But again, I wanna try and have some black areas in here, and this shows me that we're making little dots in between each square. that almost look like strings of beads, which is kind of neat. And then I just connect. These are really fun to do too if you have micro pens. Which are even finer than the Sharpie pen. Okay, so we've pretty much finished our pattern design. Now, so what I was talking about before with the patterns getting kind of confusing to see, you can see there's a lot of little liney bits in here, which make the pattern a little bit, you know, kind of hard for the eye to concentrate on. So one thing I might do, if I'm finding that that's a real issue, I might go in and just isolate some areas of black to help to ground this. Okay, so I skipped every other there. And this is where not talking is really important, so you can decide where you're going to fill in your solid areas. And you know, they say there's no mistakes in Zentangle. I'm not sure I totally love what I just did, but that's okay. So when you're completely done with your patterns, to show that you are done, what you're going to do is you're going to sign it or initial it at the bottom, and then date it with the day's date. And then you'll come and bring your completed design to me. From there, what you're going to do is we'll decide what your large scale project is going to be. I'd like to everyone to create one large scale Zentangle, whether that's one of the options that you find online or you know, something that you kind of decide is inspiring to you. But we'll talk more about that in another video. Okay? All right, so go ahead, grab the materials you need, and begin Zentangling.